Good morning. I'm Ray Nenow, and as always, happy to be here. But I'm going to jump right in today with Joshua 14, 12 through 14. It's the King James Version because the way it says it, I like what it says. Caleb is speaking here, and he says, "Now, therefore, give me this mountain." And that's what we're talking about today. We really are talking about taking the mountain. He says, "Now, therefore, give me this mountain, whereof the Lord spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the giants were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be it, the Lord will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said." You know, I've had a lot of mountains lately. I've come up against a lot of giants, as well. And so this whole thing today, as always, is every time I seem to come and share, it is so much what God is saying to me at that moment, and it's so much a reflection of what God is doing in my heart. And so that's why it's so many times I can just open my heart because it's so real. When you realize all the things you come up against, and you really do see the mountain, and the mountain seems unattainable. And then you see the giants and you think, how am I going to get through there? But that's what we're going to talk about today. I hope after listening, you'll also be able to say, as Caleb, "Give me this mountain." Moses sent the 12 spies into the land, God's promised land. One leader from every one of the 12 tribes to spy out the land and see what it held. It was leadership that went. It wasn't just people. It was the leadership of each tribe. I think about the Christian leadership here in America and all that's going on and all the mountains they're encountering and have to climb and all the giants they're coming up against, like CRT in the schools, same-sex marriage, LGBTQ, mandatory vaccines, and it goes on and on. Some of the leadership are winning, but a large part are not. And that's sad. They're coming under it. It's either coming under it through church politics or it's coming under it through politics in general. They're not able to see the promised land that God promised. They're not able to see what God's will is for their lives. They're not following God at that point. So in Numbers 13, the scouts had gone out, and they've all returned from scouting out the land after 40 days. They came to Moses and Aaron and to all of the Israelite congregation in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh, and brought them word and showed them the land's fruit. They told Moses, "We came to a land to which you sent us. Surely it flows with milk and honey. This is the fruit." I mean, they showed the fruit, the unbelievable fruit. All the people got to see the fruit. But then it says, this key word starts the next verse, "but." Otherwise, it negates everything prior to coming there. It says, "But the people who dwell there are strong, and the cities are fortified and very strong. Moreover, there we saw the sons of Anak, of great stature and courage." How often do we come up against those things in our own life? And then we look at them and we think, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to be able to climb that mountain. There's no way I'm going to fight those giants. He says, but when they saw the fruit, you thought that would have been enough. I mean, unbelievable fruit. God had told them from the very beginning, they're going to go to the promised land. The promised land is going to be a land of milk and honey. It's going to be a bountiful land. They bring back that fruit, that bountiful fruit. He says, but the people who dwell there are strong. Otherwise, they're saying it's going to be too difficult. The cities are fortified and very large. It's going to be too hard. I doubt very much we could overcome the city's high walls, is what they were saying. Plus, they saw the sons of Anak. There are too many giants in the land. It's too dangerous. Does that sound like you? Does that sound like you when you come upon things and you say, no. I mean, the will of God is straightforward through. What are you doing? Are you backing up because the giants look large and the mountains look too hard to climb? This is what Caleb says. He steps up after all of them have said what they've said. Caleb quieted the crowd, the people before Moses, and said, let us go up at once and possess it. We are well able to conquer it. He was ready. The others were not. He was ready. Well, Joshua was ready as well. He says, but the fellow scouts said, we're not able to go up against the people of Canaan, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought the Israelites an evil report of the land. They brought their unbelief. They started to pass out their unbelief with each other. They started talking each other out of it. I mean, these are the people that just came across the Red Sea that was parted and dry land. Now all of a sudden they hit the giants and the mountain, and it's like, we're unable. We're unable. He says, this land through which we went to spy is out as a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it are men of great stature. Then we saw the giants, the son of Anak, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. All they saw themselves as these little meek things, And, how many times is that what happens? You come up against something and you think, oh, if this person was here, he could do it. If that person was here, he could do it. Not me. If God tells you and sends you, he prepares you. He gives you the ability. God said this was their promised land. I mean, do we doubt God when he says that? I mean, when God says, go from here to here, and I will take care of you. And like I said, I've been fighting through some things, physical and personal. And, I know God said. And when I allow that to be in my heart, there's a peace that comes with it. I'm not thinking about the giants. I'm not thinking about going up the mountain. I'm thinking about the fruit, the bountiful fruit, what God is going to do in my life if I let them. Caleb was a man of faith. It says he was of a different spirit. In Numbers 14:24, he says, my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. What does it mean to be of a different spirit? I wrote these different things down. To be of a different spirit means you have a conquering attitude. You know you can go in because you think you're strong? No. You have a conquering attitude because you know Jesus is with you. It says you don't get up in your mind. You don't see defeat. You don't start thinking of all the other things. Joshua and Caleb were courageous warriors. They were ready to go. They had a conquering attitude. They were willing and ready to fight. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up once and take possession, for we are able to overcome. That's the conquering. He knew because he thought he was strong? No, he knew because God was with him. He had walked with him. They have a positive attitude. That's what a different spirit is. Caleb and Joshua did not focus on the negative. They saw the fruit of the land and the possibilities, plus the opportunities that were ahead of them. It is so easy to take the negative. It's so easy to look at what's there that's not possible. But you need to see the fruit of what God has for you and where he wants to take you and what his plan is for you. But Joshua and Caleb, who were among those who had spied out the land, they tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. They weren't talking about all the difficulties. They were talking about what God had provided for them in the land. They also had faith in God. They completely trusted in God to help them succeed. They believed God would do it as he had promised. And that's one of the keys. Where were they going? They were going to the promised land. They knew he had promised. They knew he would do it in spite of whatever else was there. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. That was Numbers 14:8. They also knew God would be with them. Joshua and Caleb recognized that with the presence of God in any battle they had already won. They'd seen the battles. They'd fought them. They'd already gone up against insurmountable odds and said, and knew God was with them then. So why is this any different? He said, only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. We can't fear the situations that and allow them to defeat us before we even move. Because that's what these people did. They were already defeated. They didn't even go into the land. They lost before they got there. They already determined they wouldn't make it. Wholeheartedly, they served God. That was part of the being different, that different spirit. They weren't looking at all the other things and what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. They were in purpose of God. They knew what God wanted. He said, this different spirit comes with a totally different attitude. And that's a real key. The attitude is what your heart displays. You want to go do other things? You want to go play ball? You want to go do this? You want to go that? Or do you want to really do what God has for you today? You want to stick in there. I know, it's a lot of people. I know when I come to do these messages, look, I could easily talked out of it. I know better now. I can't. I have to do what he says. I don't want to experience the results if I don't. And I do want to experience the blessing of God when I do. So wholeheartedly they serve God. They both survived 40 years wandering in the wilderness, and they both received in the end the promised land that God gave. They were not negative in any way. They were not fearful of their enemies. They didn't speak negatively and release a spirit of fear, like many of us do. By the time, you get done with talking to someone, they decided, I'm not going to do that. I just heard everything Ray said. They didn't speak negatively and release a spirit of fear. They had confidence and tried to encourage others. They tried to encourage the people. They didn't try to talk them out of it. How about us when we approach a different situation? What do? What's our attitude? Do we have that different spirit? That's my cry. God, give me that different spirit. Give me a spirit of you. Let that spirit of God that's in me come out. And let me do the things that you have me to do. We must understand the promises that God, has given us. And the very first promise, this was the first promise in Exodus 6, 7, and 8. He says, and I will take you to me for a people. We're going to be his people. They were going to be his people. And I will be to you a God. And you shall know that it is I, the Lord your God, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Brought them out, took them through the Red Sea, brought them out of their bondage. I mean, we need to begin to see that was the promise. He promised to bring them out of their bondage. And it says, and I will bring you into a land which I lifted up my hand and swore that I would give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I will give it to you for a heritage. I am the Lord. You have the pledge of my changeless omnipresence and faithfulness. I mean, that's his promise. That was his promise to them. He's going to be with them always. He's going to be faithful. He won't change. He's going to be who he says he is. That was the promise. But the others, all they saw was the unbelief. Joshua 14:10 says, now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive. I'm going to read some of these. There's some of the promises that were fulfilled in Caleb's life. He said, now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive. He was 40 years old when he first encountered and went into the promised land as a spy. And now, at the very end, he's 85. He was there. And he says, and as he says, these 45 years since the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while the Israelites wandered in the desert, and now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I mean, he stayed faithful. I mean, he stayed faithful the whole time. I mean, 45 years wandering in the desert, wandering in the wilderness, and yet the whole time he stayed faithful. He says, yet I am strong today as I was that day when Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so is my strength now for war and to go out and to come in. Give me this mountain, is what he's saying. So now, give me this hill country in a different version, but it says, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke that day. For you heard then how the giants were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. If the Lord will be with me, I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said. Is that what we say when the devil confronts us? That we say, it's no problem. We're going to drive you out, devil. We're going to take a stand. We're going to make sure you have no place in our life, and we're going to drive you out. And Joshua blessed him. This is after you, obviously, and gave unto Caleb the Hebron for his inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb unto that day, because that he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. These are the promises that God made to Caleb that he fulfilled. I mean, I know there's many promises he's given to me and he showed me, and I've seen where they've been fulfilled. I'd love to believe I was wholehearted all the time, but I believe that's what God is doing the work in me. Just to keep that attitude always toward him in everything I do. It's important. Let's see. Oh, these were the promises, like I said. This is a real key thing here that I'm about to share with you, because it was something that I had never saw before, but I saw it while I was studying, and I thought it was so interesting and so true. It said, in the verses in Joshua, the verses I just read, Yahweh is used rather than Elohim. Now, why is that important? Because when Yahweh is used, it's always referring to a personal relationship with the people. When Elohim is used, it's describing the relationship with the material world, not a personal relationship. Caleb had a personal relationship with God. I mean, that's why he was able to walk. That's what we need to do. We need to have that personal. This is so important to understand. It's not you in the end that have to do all this. You have to submit your heart. You've got to have that personal relationship with God, and you've got to let him be in your life. Now, the tribes of Israel were now ready to enter the promised land by crossing the Jordan River. The leadership of the tribes of Reuben and Gad came to make a deal with Moses and the leadership of Israel. And isn't that interesting? You've gone 40 years in the wilderness, and you've done all the things you were supposed to do, and these are the descendants of the ones that chose not to go in. Right now, here they are. They're coming to make a deal with Moses. Why are they making it? They're making a deal because they liked where they were better. They liked the east side of the Jordan better than the promised land, Hebron. Gad and Reuben had large herds of cattle, and they saw this territory as being the very best for grazing. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that how it works? Isn't it? We care more about what we're doing personally than what God is doing. It always struck me, and it actually came up in a whole situation that I heard the other night, but the house of God, it should be first. But so many of us make our houses first. So many of us make our lives first. When it really should be always, what does God want? What can I be doing for God right now? What is it he wants me to do? Not what do I want to do? Their eyes were upon, Gad and Reuben, eyes were upon what they saw, the land, as being so much to their own benefit that they were willing to forget going into the promised land and not help their fellow Israelites. I mean, this is an army. They're 12 tribes, and when they go as an army. And Moses says in Numbers 32, 6, 13, and he says, and Moses, now this is them about to go back in, and he says, and Moses said to the sons of Gad and of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? While everybody's sitting there praying in the church, are you just sitting there? While everybody's praying for or moving to try to gain what God wants, are you just sitting there, not worried about what they're doing? While people are helping other people. I used to always think about the prison ministry. We'd have so many would come, but there was so many that would not come, that could have come. What were they doing? Just sitting there and letting the brethren go do it? When there's needed help and with somebody's house because there's problems in the house. Are you just sitting there? Are you not going to go in? Are you not going to enter in? Because you're really happy where you are? Because you're comfortable where you are? So he said, Moses said to the son of Gad and Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? Then he says, why do you discourage the hearts of the Israelites from going over to the land which God has given them? He says, like your fathers did when I sent them to see the land. It's the very same thing. These are the children. The children are doing exactly what their fathers did. They're discouraging the others from going into the land. And they've already spent 40 years in the wilderness because they weren't going to be allowed to enter the land, which I'll say here shortly. He says, for when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the hearts of the Israelites from going into the land the Lord had given them. And the Lord's anger was kindled on that day, And he swore, saying, surely none of the men who came out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, except Caleb and Joshua, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the desert and wilderness for 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was consumed. Are we wondering? Or are we one of those that, is in the wilderness still? Are we wandering around? Because we were not willing to enter into what God had for us. We didn't choose to take that position and to share that part that God had given us. We decided to sit back. We decided to let our brethren get up and take the responsibility. We decided to letting our friends take the responsibility of helping others. So, where are you today? Are you Gad and Reuben? Because you know what happened to them? They eventually did go. But when they got done, they came back out because they had left their wives and children and all that still on the east side of the Jordan. They still didn't hear. They were even part of the promised land. They went in. How many people have gone in and experienced God's true spirit? Gone in worship and praise and really experienced what God has, and yet turned back around and went back out. How many? Many have done that. Many have done that. You don't want to be one of them. Are you Gad and Reuben, or are you a Caleb and a Joshua? All I can say here today, we need to take the mountain. It's time. Your life's not your own. You gave it up. I mean, you think about all the people when they came out of Egypt. God gave them the way out of bondage so that they in the end could serve him. Not serve themselves, to serve him. And that's what he's done for us. I mean, many of you have come out of your bondage of drugs. I've come out of my bondage of drugs and all the different things, the unclean, all the aspects of my life. I've come out. What for? So I can build an empire, so I can build this great business, so I can get all this money, so I can do all these other things? No. God brought me out so I can serve him. So I can do what his will is in my life. So I can choose, to serve him with a whole heart. Just like Caleb, just like Joshua. When you do that, it brings a special peace in your life. You don't feel that anxieties. You don't feel that troubling, because you know why? You're doing the will of God. You're choosing to do what God has sent you to do. And when you choose that, it's very special. But you got to have a different spirit. You can't have the attitude that the many that have left, that left Egypt had. They had an attitude. It wasn't a different spirit. They didn't think they can conquer the land. They expected everything to be done for them. They murmured. They spoke against the leaders that brought them to the very place where they could have had everything. They murmured. They attacked them. They did all those things. So, let's go take the mountain. Whatever it is in your life, let's take the mountain. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. You can see us Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8:30. You can also go to our website at wordoffaithfellowship.org. Again, let's take the mountain. Thank you.